The elevator doors slid open with a mechanical whir, revealing the dimly lit interior that gleamed faintly under flickering fluorescent lights. It was one of those rare, sticky summer evenings in the city, where the air clung to your skin, heavy and oppressive. I stepped in, tapping the worn button for the 15th floor, my apartment, a sanctuary I desperately needed after the day I'd had. My shirt stuck to my back, and I could feel a thin sheen of sweat gathering at my temples. I leaned against the cool metal wall, letting my head fall back as the elevator began its ascent with a muted hum. For a brief moment, the rhythmic vibration of the machinery was oddly comforting. My mind drifted to the familiar routine of my evenings. A quick shower, a lazy dinner in front of the TV, and maybe a call to my best friend to vent about work. Predictable. The elevator jolted slightly between the 3rd and 4th floors, just enough to make my stomach drop. I straightened instinctively, my fingers brushing against the handrail. It wasn't unusual for this old thing to hiccup mid-ride. Still, the brief interruption left a faint unease in its wake, a nagging feeling that didn't fully dissolve even when the motion smoothed out again. Just as I let out a shaky sigh, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the lobby, growing louder. The doors began to slide closed, but a hand darted through the gap, triggering the sensors. I froze, watching as the doors stuttered and reopened, and my stepbrother, Caleb, slipped inside. "Made it," he muttered, a faint grin tugging at his lips as he brushed back a stray lock of his dark hair. He wore his usual air of effortless cool, faded jeans, a gray t-shirt that clung just right, and a leather jacket slung over one shoulder. His cologne hit me before anything else, a clean, woodsy scent that I recognized instantly. "Hey," I said, my voice tight. We hadn't seen each other in weeks, not since the awkward family dinner where our parents had announced their engagement. I hadn't expected him to show up here tonight, of all places. "Hey," he echoed, his gaze lingering on me for a beat longer than necessary. Then he hit the button for the 12th floor and leaned casually against the opposite wall, his arms crossed over his chest. The elevator began its ascent again, the tension in the small space almost palpable. I tried not to look at him directly, but I could feel his presence like a physical weight. It was unnerving how easily he seemed to fit into my world, like he'd always been there. "So, you live here now?" I asked, my voice coming out more clipped than I intended. I stared at the panel of buttons as though they held the answers to every unspoken question between us. "Yeah, Mom thought it'd be easier for everyone if I stayed close while we sort out the family stuff," he said, his tone casual, but there was a subtle edge to his words. He shifted, the leather of his jacket creaking softly as he adjusted his stance. "Guess that means you're stuck with me." I forced a tight smile, even as my heart thudded harder than it should have. "Great." The elevator jolted again, more violently this time. The lights flickered, and a soft, ominous groan reverberated through the shaft. We both froze, the small space suddenly feeling much smaller. "Did it just?" Caleb started, but before he could finish, the elevator shuddered to a halt. The hum of the motor died, leaving us in a silence so absolute it felt suffocating. Panic flared in my chest as I hit the button for the emergency alarm, but it only gave a weak, unconvincing buzz. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, pressing it again, harder this time. "Looks like we're stuck," Caleb said, his voice steady but laced with something I couldn't quite place. Amusement? Annoyance? I couldn't tell. I turned to him, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't funny. What if we're in here for hours?" He shrugged, the faintest hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. "Then I guess we've got plenty of time to catch up." The words hung between us, heavy and loaded, as I realized just how close we were in the confined space. I couldn't tell if the shiver running down my spine was from the tension or the sudden, oppressive stillness of the air. Either way, I had the distinct feeling that this was only the beginning of whatever was about to unfold. The silence in the elevator stretched, punctuated only by the faint hum of the emergency light. It cast a cold, bluish glow that seemed to amplify every detail: the curve of Caleb's jaw, the way his dark lashes framed his eyes, the casual slump of his body against the wall. He looked so at ease, as if being trapped in a steel box suspended several floors above the ground was just another minor inconvenience. I wasn't so composed. My fingers drummed against the railing, the metallic tap-tap-tap breaking the stillness. Should we call someone? I asked, fishing my phone out of my pocket. The screen lit up, but the reception bars stubbornly refused to climb above 0. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You can try. Doubt we'll get a signal in here. Great, I muttered, sliding my phone back into my pocket. I glanced at the emergency button again, but the thought of pressing it for the 3rd time felt pointless. The walls felt closer now, the air heavier. I wiped my palms against my jeans, trying to ignore the way Caleb's eyes flicked to the motion. You always this jittery, or is it just me? He teased, his tone light but probing. I shot him a look. You're not exactly helping. He pushed off the wall and took a step closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Relax. Someone will notice the elevator's down soon enough. It's not like we're gonna be in here all night. I didn't respond, turning my attention to the ceiling as if the answer to our predicament might be hidden in the maze of faint seams and panels. The truth was, it wasn't the elevator that had me on edge, it was him. Caleb, with his easy confidence and that knowing smirk that always seemed to suggest he was one step ahead of everyone else. I'd thought I could avoid him, keep things distant and polite, but now here we were. Trapped. Alone. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. The space between us seemed to shrink, even though neither of us moved. So, how's life in the big city? Caleb broke the silence, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Still working that boring office job? It's not boring, I said, bristling at his tone. It's stable. Stable, he repeated, like the word was a foreign concept. He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied me. You always did play it safe. And you always loved pushing buttons, I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. His smirk widened. Only when it's worth it. There it was again, that undertone, subtle but unmistakable. It made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't entirely blame on the situation. I turned away, my fingers tightening around the railing, trying to ground myself. But his voice followed me. You ever think about doing something different? He asked, his tone softer now, almost curious. Something that scares you? I let out a short, humorless laugh. Like what? Skydiving? Bungee jumping? Getting stuck in an elevator with you? Maybe, he said, stepping closer. The air between us crackled, charged with something I didn't want to name. Or maybe something a little more personal. I froze, my pulse thudding in my ears. The space between us had disappeared, his presence a tangible weight at my side. I felt the heat radiating off him, smelled the faint woodsy scent of his cologne. It was intoxicating and infuriating all at once. Caleb, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't know what I was going to say. Stop? Don't? Keep talking? He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low murmur. What is it about me that gets under your skin, huh? You've been tense since the second I walked in here. I'm not tense, I lied, the words brittle. My hands were clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. I willed myself to meet his gaze, but the intensity in his eyes made my breath hitch. Liar, he said softly, his lips quirking into a half-smile. He was close enough now that I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. You're tense because you're afraid of what you're feeling right now. Don't, I said, the single word a plea, a warning, and a question all at once. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of it loud in the oppressive silence. Don't what? He asked, his voice feather-light but his eyes sharp. He was testing me, pushing me, the way he always had. Only this time, it wasn't playful or harmless. This time, it was dangerous. I shook my head, trying to break the spell, but he didn't move. His proximity was magnetic, and no matter how much I told myself to look away, to step back, I couldn't. I didn't want to. And that terrified me. This is wrong, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. You know that, right? Stepbrothers, he finished, his voice tinged with something that almost sounded like mockery. Not exactly a Hallmark moment, but it's not like we're breaking any laws. It's not about laws, I said, my voice rising. It's about boundaries, about... About what other people would think? He interrupted, his tone hardening. He stepped even closer, his chest nearly brushing mine. Since when do you care so much about other people? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. His eyes bore into mine, daring me to challenge him, to walk away, to do anything but stand there and let the tension between us spiral out of control. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. It wasn't other people I was afraid of. It was myself. The elevator jolted suddenly, a harsh, mechanical groan that snapped the spell like a whip. I stumbled back, gripping the railing for support, my heart racing for an entirely different reason now. The lights flickered, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the thought of the cable snapping and plunging us to our deaths was all I could think about. Easy, Caleb said, steadying me with a hand on my arm. His touch was firm, grounding, but it sent a shiver up my spine that had nothing to do with fear. I'm fine, I said quickly, pulling away. The loss of his touch left me feeling unmoored, but I couldn't let myself dwell on it. We just need to figure out how to get out of here. Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he was going to push the subject, to keep needling at the fragile thread of control I was clinging to. But instead, he stepped back, giving me space. Fine, he said, his voice quieter now, almost resigned. Let's figure it out. The tension between us didn't dissipate, it lingered, heavy and suffocating, like the air in the elevator. But for now, it was buried beneath the more immediate problem of getting out. At least, that's what I told myself as I avoided his gaze and tried to focus on anything else. Because if I didn't, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop myself from crossing a line I couldn't uncross. The air in the elevator had grown stifling. Even the dim emergency lights seemed oppressive, its faint buzz burrowing under my skin. Caleb stood on the opposite side of the space now, arms crossed, his jaw tight. The brief truce we'd formed in our attempt to escape had unraveled into an unbearable silence. Each passing second stretched out, fraught with unspoken tension that filled the cramped space like a gas leak, waiting for a spark. I tapped my fingers on the railing, a nervous habit I couldn't stop. My gaze darted toward the emergency panel again. We tried everything, pressing the buttons, pounding on the walls, even shouting for help. Nothing worked. We were truly stuck. And with no phone service, no exit, and no distractions, there was nothing left but the two of us. You're going to wear a hole in that railing, Caleb said, his voice breaking the silence. There was a teasing lilt to his words, but his eyes betrayed something heavier, something I couldn't quite place. Better the railing than me, I muttered without looking at him, though I could feel the weight of his gaze. It wasn't the first time I'd caught him watching me tonight, and each time, it left a heat crawling up my neck that I couldn't shake. You always do that, you know, he said, taking a step closer. His tone was softer now, more thoughtful. Keep yourself so wound up you're about to snap. I turned to him, my frustration bubbling to the surface. What do you expect me to do, Caleb? Laugh about this? Pretend it's fine that we're stuck here indefinitely? No, he said, his voice steady but quiet. But maybe stop pretending you don't feel anything at all. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about, he said, another step closer. He was in my space now, his presence magnetic and overwhelming. His dark eyes bore into mine, searching, challenging, daring me to look away. I've seen the way you've been looking at me. My breath hitched, and for a moment, I was frozen. You're imagining things. He smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. Am I? I opened my mouth to deny it again, to push him away with words, but no sound came out. Because he wasn't wrong. I had been looking at him, watching him, wondering about him, feeling things I had no business feeling. It was wrong, all of it, but the truth was a traitor, written plainly in the heat rushing to my face and the pounding of my heart. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't, I started, my voice trembling. This isn't what? He interrupted, his voice dropping to a low murmur. He took another step, and suddenly the space between us was nothing. This isn't normal? It isn't okay? Or it isn't what you want? My back hit the wall, and I hadn't even realized I'd been retreating. Caleb stood so close now that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, smell the faint woodsy scent of his cologne. His hand came up, not touching me but hovering near, as if he were holding himself back by a thread. "You're my stepbrother," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. They sounded hollow even to me. "Technically," he said, his lips twitching into a humorless smile. "But that doesn't change the way you're looking at me right now." My breath came shallow and fast as I tried to summon the strength to push him away. But I couldn't. Because he was right. I was looking at him in a way I shouldn't, feeling things I shouldn't. The intensity of his gaze, the heat of his body so close to mine. It was too much, too overwhelming. "Caleb," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It was a warning, a plea, and a surrender all at once. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice low and rough. His hand finally closed the distance, brushing against mine where it gripped the railing. The contact sent a jolt through me, electric and undeniable. I wanted to tell him to stop. I wanted to shove him away, to create the space I so desperately needed to think clearly. But the words wouldn't come. My body betrayed me, frozen in place, caught in the magnetic pull between us. He leaned in, his face so close to mine that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. His eyes flicked down to my lips, then back up to my eyes, searching for permission. I didn't give it, but I didn't deny him either. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as the world outside the elevator seemed to disappear entirely. And then he kissed me. It was tentative at first, almost as if he were waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The second his lips touched mine, the tension that had been building between us all night snapped like a taut wire, and suddenly, it didn't matter anymore, none of it. Not the elevator, not the rules, not the voices in my head screaming that this was wrong. All that mattered was the way his mouth moved against mine, the way his hand slid up to cradle my jaw, his thumb brushing against my cheek in a way that sent shivers down my spine. Time seemed to stop, the moment stretching into eternity. And for that brief eternity, I let myself fall. I let myself feel. The heat, the electricity, the sheer weight of everything we weren't supposed to be, it consumed me entirely. But just as quickly as it had begun, it ended. I broke the kiss, my chest heaving as I turned my head away. "This isn't," my voice cracked, and I swallowed hard, trying to collect myself. "This isn't right." Caleb didn't move away. His hand lingered near mine, his voice soft and steady. "Then why didn't you stop me?" I didn't have an answer. The truth felt too big, too messy, too dangerous to put into words. So I said nothing, my silence speaking louder than anything else. The elevator groaned again, a harsh reminder of the reality we were still trapped in. I felt his gaze on me, heavy and unreadable as I stared at the floor, my mind racing. What had we just done? What did it mean? And what would happen when the doors finally opened? For now, there were no answers, only the oppressive weight of what we'd just crossed, and the uncertain path that lay ahead. The elevator jolted again, a small, mechanical protest that snapped the air between us. I stepped away from Caleb, the distance feeling both like a relief and a loss. My chest was tight, my heart racing as though it hadn't caught up with the moment. The taste of his kiss lingered on my lips, a phantom sensation that I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. Neither of us spoke. The silence was unbearable, the kind that wasn't just quiet but brimming with too many unspoken words. Caleb leaned back against the wall, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed somewhere near the floor. He looked calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the subtle way his fingers gripped his biceps as if trying to hold himself together. I wanted to say something, anything, to fill the space between us. But every word that came to mind felt either too big or too small. Apologizing felt wrong, like it would cheapen what had happened. Pretending it didn't matter felt impossible because it did. It mattered in ways I couldn't even begin to unpack. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "So, are we going to talk about it, or are you just going to keep staring at the floor?" I looked up sharply, heat rushing to my face. I wasn't staring at the floor, I mumbled, though I had been. "Sure," he said, his voice soft but laced with that same maddening confidence. "Look, I'm not going to pretend that didn't just happen. And I'm not going to pretend I regret it either. My stomach twisted at his words. You should, I said quietly, though the conviction I'd hoped for wasn't there. Do you? He countered, his eyes locking onto mine. There was no teasing now, no smugness, just raw, unguarded curiosity. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. Did I regret it? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him it was a mistake, that it never should have happened, that it didn't mean anything. But the truth, the messy, inconvenient truth, was that I didn't. Not entirely. I don't know, I admitted, the words barely audible. Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable. He shifted, running a hand through his hair, and for the first time he looked as uncertain as I felt. I get it, he said after a moment. This is complicated. But I meant what I said. You don't have to pretend with me. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Pretending was all I knew how to do. Pretending I didn't notice the way his smile made my stomach flip. Pretending I didn't care when he teased me. Pretending the lines between us hadn't already blurred long before tonight. I leaned back against the wall, closing my eyes and exhaling shakily. What happens now? I asked, more to myself than to him. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. We figure it out, Caleb said simply. His tone was calm, but there was an edge of determination that made me look at him. Unless you want to forget this ever happened, there it was, a choice laid bare between us. A way out as clean and simple as it could ever be. But the thought of erasing it, of pretending it didn't matter, made my chest ache in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. Before I could respond, the elevator groaned one last time, followed by a faint, metallic clunk. The overhead light flickered and went steady, and then, with an almost anticlimactic ding, the doors slid open. Bright fluorescent light flooded the space, almost blinding after the dim confines of the elevator. A maintenance worker stood on the other side, clipboard in hand, his expression bored. Looks like you two got stuck, he said, his tone flat. Caleb stepped out first, offering a curt nod. Thanks for the rescue, he said, his voice steady, betraying none of the storm I knew was raging beneath the surface. I followed, my legs shaky as if they'd forgotten how to move. The hallway felt too open, too bright, too normal after what had just transpired. My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the intimacy of the last hour with the mundanity of reality crashing back in. As we walked side by side toward the lobby, the silence stretched again. This time, it wasn't comfortable or charged, it was strained, brittle, like the slightest wrong word could shatter it entirely. Are you coming to dinner tomorrow? Caleb asked suddenly, his voice casual but his tone deliberate. I glanced at him, caught off guard. What? Dinner, he repeated, looking straight ahead. Mom's cooking. You know how she gets if you skip. The mention of our parents jolted me, a stark reminder of just how tangled and impossible this situation was. I don't know, I said hesitantly. Caleb stopped walking, turning to face me. His expression was unreadable again, but there was something in his eyes, something searching, something vulnerable. Just think about it, he said softly. And then he was gone, walking ahead of me toward the exit, leaving me standing alone in the harsh fluorescent light. As I watched him go, my thoughts churned, a chaotic mix of guilt, longing, and fear. I didn't know what the right answer was, or even if there was one. All I knew was that the lines between us had been crossed, and there was no way to go back. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be simple. But for now, all I could do was take one step at a time, and hope I could figure out how to live with the weight of what we'd just done. The drive home was a blur. The city lights streaked past the car windows, their glow dim compared to the storm brewing in my chest. I couldn't stop replaying the moment. The way Caleb had kissed me, the way I hadn't stopped him, the way his words lingered like an echo in my mind. You don't have to pretend with me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the leather. The quiet hum of the radio barely registered over the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. Every rational part of me screamed that what had happened was wrong, that it needed to stay buried in that elevator, never to resurface. But the other part, the part that refused to listen to reason, couldn't stop feeling the pull. The tension, the connection, the fire. It wasn't just wrong, it was impossible. And yet, it felt more real than anything else ever had. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room window. I sat in the car for a moment, my hands still gripping the wheel, unable to make myself go inside. Mom's cooking. You know how she gets if you skip. Caleb's voice played in my mind again, low and steady, like he wasn't just talking about dinner. Was he daring me to face him tomorrow? To sit across the table, pretending nothing had happened? Or was it something else? An invitation, a challenge, a promise? I exhaled shakily and got out of the car, the cold night air biting at my skin. The house was silent as I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath my feet grounding me just enough to stop the spinning in my head. I turned on the kitchen light, the warm glow spilling over the countertops, and poured myself a glass of water. The silence in the house was oppressive, wrapping around me like a shroud. Normally, I would have welcomed the quiet. Tonight, it felt suffocating. As I leaned against the counter, staring at the glass in my hands, my phone buzzed on the table. The sound was jarring, breaking the stillness and sending a spike of adrenaline through me. I reached for it hesitantly, my pulse quickening when I saw Caleb's name on the screen. "Caleb, did you make it home?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Simple, harmless. But nothing about this felt harmless anymore. I typed out a response, "Yeah. Thanks, Dad," then deleted it. I typed again, "We need to talk, dot," then deleted that too. My mind raced, searching for the right words, the right tone, the right way to navigate this impossible situation. Before I could settle on anything, another message appeared. "Caleb, I meant what I said. You don't have to pretend with me." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I set the phone down as if it had burned me, my hands trembling. His words echoed in the quiet kitchen, filling the empty space with questions I didn't have answers to. What did he mean? Did he think this could be something more? Could it? And more terrifyingly, did I want it to be? The phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with another message. But this time, I didn't look. I turned off the kitchen light and climbed the stairs, leaving the unanswered question and the phone on the counter. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his words stayed with me, weaving through my thoughts like a thread I couldn't unravel. What happens when you stop pretending? I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. But I wasn't sure I could avoid it either.